Hey, this is for Ron Tapscott in the Save Oakland Sports Facebook group. Ron was curious as to know former Oakland City Council member, Oakland City Council President Ignacio de la Fuente's role with respect to the Coliseum Joint Powers Authority. He was essentially blaming Ignacio for, well, it was undefined. I chimed in that Ignacio was simply the chairman of the JPA. He was not the day-to-day manager and or the executive director. And so I felt it more efficient to make this video, and also along with my overall philosophy of monetizing my content, um, to explain to Ron uh, what happened, the history of who held what position among Coliseum Joint Powers Authority executives. And the Coliseum Joint Powers Authority executive itself was actually reborn in 1996 after, well, as part of the bond issue, a key part of the bond issue that was created to produce the over $200 million to pay for primarily the refurbished east side of the Coliseum, including what is now known as Mount Davis. It has been for some time. But what happened was, when it became clear that the Oakland Football Marketing Association, the organization created to sell personal seat licenses to generate the revenue to pay off the bonds that produced the $200 million check for the construction, was not going to be enough to retire that bond issue. Ignacio de la Fuente, who had just arrived on the city council in 1993, observed that, well, it's our money now, and realized when he became Oakland City Council president that the reporting on the operations of the JPA was quarterly, by way of a meeting held with only the county, we now call the county administrator, and then the city manager, the city administrator, then the city manager, and the county administrator, Alameda County administrator, and one member of the Board of Supervisors, and one member from the Oakland City Council, and that was it. Well, Ignacio changed that, working with, well, not on his own, but of course, after getting the approval of the Oakland City Council and then the JPA itself, to have Ezra Rapport, assistant city manager, write a business plan that called for, among other things, what we have today: a chairperson, two members of the Oakland City Council, and two members of the Alameda County Board of Supervisors. And that was the original format, and that's since been expanded. It also included a provision to have up to 20 members of the business community. That provision of the enabling legislation for the Coliseum Joint Powers Authority has never been activated. Okay, but I digress. That set in motion the schedule, from a scheduling perspective, the legislative process we have today, where we have monthly meetings, the third Thursday, actually the third Friday, the last Friday of the month, and at 8:30 in the morning. Sometimes it would be Thursday, sometimes it would be Friday. That's gone on for some decades now. The first Coliseum executive director was Ezra Rapport. Now, the chairperson of the Coliseum JPA was Ignacio. Ezra was the first executive director. Day-to-day management was handled for the first time by a private organization, First Spectacor Management Group, or we call SMG. And the person who represented SMG was at first a woman named Sally Roach, okay, who was my nemesis. That's another story. At any rate, Ezra then gave way to Dina McLean. Dina was our bond counsel. But by advantage of her being the only person that was of a mind to focus on the Coliseum on a regular basis, because she was the bond counsel, quote, responsible, unquote, for the PSL bonds, she managed to get herself appointed as the Coliseum executive director. Dina was and is well liked by many people, and more of a bureaucratic placeholder, I think is fair to describe her as. And if I say that with a tinge of a pejorative slant, it has to do with how I was treated by Dina over the years. And our relationship has always been less than efficient, because there are aspects of sports sponsorship and sports facilities management that she didn't know, and they reared their head when we were trying to bring the Super Bowl to Oakland. We had a meeting on August 25th of the year 2000 at 4:30 in the afternoon to go over the Super Bowl bid I was working on. And Dina in that meeting said, and I was sitting right next to then Alameda County Supervisor Scott Haggerty, I don't get this thing called sports sponsorship. And she was the executive director. Anyway, so moving along, it was Dina, and then Dina would alternate with Ezra. And finally, Dina gave way to a gentleman representing SMG named Mark Kaufman. Now, Mark Kaufman was manager, but then he was elevated to executive director of the JPA, and SMG would put another manager. I think they once sent Scott. I'm sorry, that was before Scott. They once sent in Doug Thornton, who is the famous manager of the Superdome, the man who saved the Superdome after Hurricane Katrina. Well, that was down the road a piece in terms of years. Anyway, Mark Kaufman was the executive director for, I think, a couple of years, 3 years. And then Mark gave way to a woman named Bonnie Priest. I'm screwing Bonnie's last name. Bonnie was a delightful person. Bonnie Priest is the actress from Star Wars. But this Bonnie and that Bonnie had the same first name. But Bonnie came on in 2004 and lasted until, I believe, 2008. 2007, I'm sorry. And then she gave way, back to Mark Kaufman, and then Mark gave way to Dina. Dina has been the longest serving executive director, okay? And Dina lasted as executive director up until 2014, when we brought on Scott McKibben, and I personally lobbied for him to get hired. And actually, that was 2014 going into 2015. Libby became mayor November 2014. Scott lasted until 2019, when he was ousted for something that really the board set him up to do. And I still to this day feel sorry for Scott about what happened to him, and take some measure of responsibility for not warning him about how the JPA has a tendency to eat up and chew up and spit out is the term I'm looking for, people from the private sector. So it should come as no surprise that Henry Gardner, legendary Henry Gardner, former Oakland City manager, is the current executive director. And that is where we stand. But it's important to remember that in terms of the hierarchy, you have the chairperson, like right now, the chairperson is Nate Miley, okay? Chairperson, executive director, day-to-day stadium manager. Right now, the day-to-day stadium manager is Nicole Strange. And she represents AEG, okay? I like Nicole. So anyway, that's how it lays out. Subscribe to Zenny62 and bookmark oaklandnewsnow.com. And if you have any other questions, please type them in there and I'll address them. Thanks.